Hey everybody, it's me, Jamie. Hello, Zova. Uh, this is VTubers Anonymous. Yes, I'm Jamie, and I'm a VTuber. Hi, Zova. And we did fuck it up, and we have Alutier. So, welcome to Streaming Into the Void episode. We really should have kept checking this, and now we can't. So this is true. We've managed that. Hey, Rogue. Hey, Steel. Hey, Rosemary. Yeah, no shit. We had an official Streaming Into the Void. Yeah, we had a first episode. We were official. Fuck if I know. We'd have to go back to old Chaos Unboxing to figure that one out. Alright, what are we gonna converse about? Let's get it out of the way. Let's talk it over. Let's get it out of the way. Twitch hates you. And put that out there. Twitch hates you and YouTube isn't an option. So let's just talk about that for a few moments. They are. They haven't cut it significantly enough yet. The barrier to entry is still high, but not as high as it used to be, and we appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, them cutting 500, cutting it down to 500 is really good. And then you've got your watch hours, but your watch hours have been reduced as well. Yeah. Yeah. Or you get like what, like a million hits on a short? Yeah. 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 Then you monetize. YouTube not only doesn't protect against DMCA's, but YouTube is all like, we are the home of. You can only hear my voice. Sound check. Okay, give me a second. We should be good. Let me actually turn on my stream. Okay. Start doing the thing. Nope, no one can hear you guys. Give me a second. This is set up on the old function too, so it should just work. Okay, fine. Let me use the new. It's, you know what I mean? In the old one, it just worked. But here, let me.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. So are we going to count our era of testing? All
One,
right.
two, one, three,
Are we
four.
going to count? Are we going to count the era of chaos and podcasting as part of swimming into the void?
Yes.
So if we've done it monthly, Our first was in April of last year, which means this would be episode 15.
All right, let me change it.
Whether that's correct or not, we're going with 15. We'll keep the
We're
count
going to say that this is episode 15, and we're going to move on from there.
That means
assuming
we've done
is
this for
episode
over
15.
a year.
We have.
We have.
Yay! Happy
somehow,
over a year, guys.
Despite everything that's happened in the last over a year, we've somehow managed to keep the podcast
We
consistently
somehow
existing.
managed to keep the podcast consistent.
Wait, most of it being completely just on the fly, happening to do it once every month, just because.
Yeah.
But the very first Chaos,
Testing, one,
Okay, there we
two.
go.
the original Chaos and Podcasting was on April 2nd of last year.
Really? Nice.
Yeah.
That's really good. All right, I'm on board with that. That's really cool. So yes, that was our first. And we would have remained Chaos on Podcasting, you know, till all my solo content got kicked off the channel.
Yeah,
Oh, Shannon's
you know
happy
that
to
channel
see
hasn't
you too.
streamed and the channel hasn't streamed in forever, and the other channel involved hasn't streamed in forever too.
Yep. Damie stands alone and victorious.
Yes,
Most.
you look at everyone
Excellent.
smugly.
Yeah. Give him the smug face over. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, it'll probably
this
get
model.
deactivated at some point.
I hope not. I mean, it does have some important archives of.
It does. It does have important archives, but I think they deactivate after a while?
The account will be there forever.
Nice. Oh, you just
The
noticed
affiliate.
the Damie Bass back there?
We've
The
had that
affiliate
sort
that the account might eventually go away because of the things they mentioned about inactive affiliates probably getting removed.
Oh, it'll lose affiliate. That's fine.
no one to
But-
think anything.
Other than that, I mean, it'll still exist as an account. And so,
Yeah, that's nice. So it'll have some of the stuff that's archived. So, Twitch hates you and YouTube isn't an option for most people. So, welcome to the Twitch Partner Plus program. A program that doesn't help anybody.
it
helps.
helps. It helps the rich get richer.
So, if I remember correctly,
Nobody that
from-
matters. Yeah.
If I remember correctly from the mathematics that were plugged on this, I think it helps the top 0.3% of Twitch at the most forgiving numerical analysis.
I think it's so they said what is it 350 like active recurring
subs. Yes.
as in not gifts, not it has to be 300. And some people get that.
Yeah,
Like,
some
it
people
depends on
pull
the
it.
person.
Like Pokey pulls it. And Lily
Some
Pichu
people-
pulls it. And XQC
Some people,
pulls
even
it.
like the huge people, even the huge people don't pull it though. Like,
Yeah.
because some people like, but depending on the person and who they have in their streams and stuff, sometimes they get more gifts, subs, and some people get more reoccurring. So like, I know
So-
there was some huge like streamer I saw on Twitter that was like saying, "Oh well, I've got like like several thousand like active subs, but most of them are gifted." So like,
Concurrent for 3 months consecutive, and you get put in the program for 12 months, even if it dips. So here's the thing. If you are in the top 0.1% of Twitch that gets this, does anybody know, class, why it doesn't fucking matter? Anybody?
you're already making that much money already.
The top 0.1% has sponsors. And so this extra money thrown at them by Twitch is a pittance.
It is, however, a way to try to keep them on Twitch's platform specifically,
It is.
and no one else matters, which reaffirms what I said to Zerv on Twitter, actually, which is that Twitch only cares about two groups of people with their changes in their focus on the policy. Twitch will be the entry point for streamers
Yes. it's true.
And it will be where people who are already very large fish in the pond will stay for reliable profit.
Yeah.
But any mid-sized streamer, it needs to reassess their place on this platform, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's keeping the big fish. And while, yes, not all of them are sponsored, we're talking the upper echelons. The 70-30 split they made a big fuss about and then stopped. Not to mention a lot of those streamers, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but Twitch themselves can enter into a contract with you. Right? That's
You
what
do already when you become
Yep.
an affiliate partner, but they can enter an additional one.
Yes, they can choose to enter in. They can offer you another contract, which is how they keep some people on the platform, like Pokimane and shit. And the contract, from what we know, is you have to stream X amount of hours for whatever, which is why you have these fuckers just streaming MasterChef and Avatar: The Last Airbender and fucking it up for all the mid streamers. But that's
Yeah.
Meow Moonified qualifies for it and is even offered to friends that are partnered to help them hit the 350 mark if they're close to it. Yeah, go Mooney. So, yes. Not everybody is sponsored, but we're talking about the majority, not the minority. We're talking about the majority because this program is supposed to help the majority of that 1%, but doesn't really do anything. So people like Mooney and whatnot who get something out of this, good. I'm glad they get their 70% back. Because Twitch going from 70 to 50 again was bullshit. Like,
Especially
just
when
a
platforms
slap
like
in the
YouTube
face.
offer the 70-30, you know,
Mhm.
like other platforms offer a 70-30 as sort of like a baseline, and then over here Twitch is like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take your money. That's the worst thing is that Twitch isn't even profitable with the 50-50. They're not even profitable at that point either.
Yeah.
So like, they really don't.
But
want
they're
lose
going
those
to
big
keep
creators.
going because if they don't, someone else will fill the space.
Yeah.
This space, Twitch is occupying this chunk of space, right? Like, it is. And if they didn't occupy this chunk of space, right? Something else would do it. And it wouldn't be just YouTube absorbing everybody. Someone else would develop a different platform. God knows the Kick people, if you look at on Kick and you look at a lot of there's a percentage of those that are saying welcome Twitch streamers or Kick Q&A for Twitch streamers. They're aware of what's happening. And Kick wants us to go there. Even though Kick is like scummy. You know?
There's.
It's a little.
I've heard a lot of like people.
It's a
talking
little
about Kick.
dirty. Now Ash streamed on it and it was good. So here's and I actually did a bunch of time so far, more time than I should watching streams on Kick. All right, this is what I did streaming. So for what I've seen for Kick, it's like baby's first chatterbait. Only you can't get naked, because there's no regulation there. Other than you can't get naked. It's going to VTuber chat and demand them to do things. Yeah. Then you have a lot of gambling bros. But in that, and people who are just saying, hey, we're playing Red Dead Redemption, but they actually were watching The Wolf of Wall Street. There's a lot of weird movie viewing going on. But here's the thing, right? Though it's lawless, there are VTubers there. Though it is lawless, there are good people there who are just doing the thing. And their Kick is working on getting moderation up. So, if Twitter goes, Kick could take their place. That's all I've got to say about that.
So, I think
my major concern mostly with Kick right now is that they haven't taken a stance on a lot of things, especially like sort of like the whole like minorities getting a lot of hate on the platform,
Mhm.
and certain people who are figureheads of the platform who are like major investors or whatnot, who sort of like Aiden Ross and them have sort of like been allowed to sort of free wild on the platform and do what they want and not get
Mhm.
any consequences.
Yeah, this is
Them
true.
not taking a stance on that is the reason why I'm sort of like not interested in Kick, because if they had actually just come out and like done something about it, like if they had punished them or said like this is not okay and so on, then I would be more interested in the platform. But because they
Yeah.
didn't say anything about it, and
Mhm.
they sort of basically by not saying anything and not doing anything, it's sort of like, yeah, this is okay.
Mhm.
And I personally don't trust the platform right now, at least with my
Mhm.
community on that platform.
Well, that and there are a lot of right wing people on there. Like, people were streaming the indictment and just saying some truly hateful shit. And I'm sorry, Alu, please continue.
But so my view on Kick is that it's for people who want to have short-term stability, because I do not think Kick can offer any of the things that it's trying to offer long-term.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing it's doing is going to be sustainable. But if you want to reap the benefits of what they're currently promising, I mean, go for it.
My fun thing is getting paid the $16 an hour if you qualify in cryptocurrency. It's like being paid in peanuts, and you just gotta hope.
Yeah, I think Steele was mentioning to me the other day that they were actually like it's been a bit of misinformation, as in like you can immediately get paid out in crypto, or you can like wait a while and they'll pay you in actual cash. But
Yeah.
um, still
Rumble is
like
super right wing, and I would not suggest it.
Rumble is even worse than Kick. I do not recommend Rumble.
No,
I
Rumble
barely know anything
is
about Rumble,
Rumble's
but I
fucked
saw
up.
like I saw there was an Andrew Tate stream on there, and then they were like talking about boasting about some large record, and then someone else was like, "Oh yeah, well on Twitch they had a few million viewers records several times, so it's not like anything special." But anyways,
Yeah,
it was like YouTube's Kick.
yeah.
Um,
Rumble
but
is not a good place to be. I would not suggest anybody even set foot in Rumble.
I like I said, I see Kick as they're trying to capitalize, but the problem with Kick again is that they're not running a sustainable business model, and like Ali was saying, like they're probably not going to last if they continue down the path that they're on, and if they don't continue down the path that they're on, then they're going to take away a lot of the things that they've offered already, which is
Mhm.
like if they're either going to try to continue to offer the insane 95.5 that they have, as well as this quote unquote $16 an hour, and then they're going to run out of money and then be like bankrupt and whatever, or they're going to have to cut it all away.
95.5 is a very
Bandwidth is not cheap. As
It,
somebody
it,
who's
it,
been talking with like with the people who run VStream, like they know that bandwidth is not cheap, and I've been
mhm.
talking with them about their business model and shit, and like when you run a streaming platform, you have a lot of money invested in the actual
yes, you do.
bandwidth and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
bandwidth is where it's gonna be.
Servers, bandwidth. Literally, VStream is literally talking about, like, has mentioned that basically like the streaming side of things is literally a money loss thing for them. Like their
Mhm.
money that they're going to earn is going to be on non-streaming stuff, because they can't earn money on the actual streaming itself because it's just
So
not
how is
profitable.
streaming? So how is that streaming service going to remain viable?
Is It's not going to be just a streaming service. It's sort of like a loss leader. If like a company put out a thing that makes like a thing that's sort of like a carrot, like if you're familiar with Costco's like chicken and things like that, like they sell
Yes,
things at
but
a
the
loss.
whole purpose there, the purpose of a loss leader, is that having it, like detergent's a loss leader, having it is it entices people to buy the other stuff. So you pick
Mhm.
up the
Mm-hmm.
loss
So
leader, but there's other
the loss
stuff
leader
that
in
you
this
pick up that's
case for VStream
profitable.
is you bring people in via the streaming, and then you bring people in for the offline videos and the community aspect of all the VTubing stuff,
And is
which is where
that
all
where
the
the
money
profit
is.
is? Is that
Yes,
where the
The
profit is? Okay then.
the main
because
the main problem
they're
will probably
following sort of
come.
like, sorry.
Oh, I'll assume the main problem is going to come from goodwill and merchandise sales once they really get really get the ball rolling.
Well, so
Because
they're following YouTube's model of all of the money is mostly going to be in the offline videos and things like that, as well as some of the more donation oriented stuff. Like there's some other and merchandising as well. It's going to be a lot
Mhm.
more about the offline stuff, videos and stuff are all going to be have ads and stuff on that, and there's going to be You know, and so obviously the business model has to be proven, of course, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't.
they're very much following YouTube's model of things.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be so vicious on all of these models, but it's when you have all of these streams popping up, this is your audience you're talking about. And moving from one to another is going to cost you audience members because it will always cost you audience members just to slip through your little fingers.
Unless the platform dies and everyone has to find somewhere else to go, those people are just gonna be like, oh, well, you see, I could just, you know, instead of trying to get used to a new platform, I could just go find somebody else to watch.
Yeah, exactly. Now, ideally on the new platform, your numbers will go back up. If you do the thing, they should go back up, and that's good. We like that. But if that platform dies and you have to move to another platform, each time you move, it's harder to rebuild from where you were, especially if a platform goes under. Now, if you have like a bunch of fucking dudes like Ninja did when he went to Mixer, it doesn't matter if he loses a few thousand fucking viewers. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, because it's sort of like essentially when you have that many, you're already famous. People know who you are, so they'll like follow you anywhere. Like they follow you because you're famous and they already know who you are. But when you're someone small like me or you or whatever, like when nobody really cares if we a lot of, unless you're like friends of ours or like hardcore fans, most of the people we know are like they're gone the second they don't see us stream anymore. Like even like sometimes even if you go on hiatus for 2 weeks, then you will lose those people.
Steel has a good point here. Imagine a ticker tape under your stream playing silent ads. I would do that actually if it didn't cut into the resolution on my end, right? On my space that I get. And underneath they put a silent ticker for ads, or occasionally popped up an ad in my corner, then I would not mind. I'd be like, yeah, sure, run ads 24/7 on my stream. I don't give a shit, right? Because it's not intrusive. And the problem with ads that people don't is that they're intrusive. And that's where your viewership gets lost, because they're doing a classic commercial style, and it's not. Not to mention,
problem is a lot of small streamers don't have the content and the fame and whatnot to make it worth people's while to stay through that.
I've lost people based on like when new people come in, right? So when new people come in a raid, right? They're usually coming for those 250 channel points. They might throw some follows at you. Hopefully you get retention, but you'll shed like 10-20%.
Amy is 5 away from 400.
I'm 5 away from 400, and thank you. And I plan on doing something for 400. Thank you.
Let's go.
Yes.
Chill for David, chill.
So Bigger has the exact point, is because of the fact that they're trying to do commercials as you would on television, but without the structure of television. We would just put the ad in based on what you're planning around. It's just you have to actually play.
Well, sort of a problem with it too is that unlike television, the content on television gets paused essentially.
Yeah, we don't pause here.
Whereas
we just keep
if
going.
we did pause, then everyone who has a sub would sort of be like, well, what's the point? And then if we didn't pause, then everyone doesn't get to, you know.
Exactly. If they told me when my ad was going to pop up that I didn't have to be in like Stream Elements or wherever you have to be in order to see that, and it popped up like maybe on my overlay, it was just automatically put an ad in X amount of time, and subs didn't get ad free, I would stop what I was doing. But the problem is we get subs, and subs specifically pay so that they don't get ads. So, like Zova said, we are beholden to continuing the entertainment for them because they paid for it. So we can't just stop what we're doing. People won't sub then. They'll be like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Mama Nerdy has this really well done, actually. Mama Nerdy runs ads and then goes and takes a break.
Yeah, some people put more work into that, like because you can manually run ads, and of course, if you manually run them instead of letting Twitch run them, you can still avoid pre-rolls and stuff if you run them often enough. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of work to manage that, like to
Yeah.
actually
Well, Mama Nerdy's a fucking
set a
machine.
timer and all that.
Oh.
Yeah, but like when you like even still, then you're still running into the issue of well, my subs and people who don't have ad free are just going to be sitting around waiting.
Yeah.
Like,
And Mama Nerdy runs 3 minutes of ads. Like she runs 8 ads. Bang.
Yeah.
So, and that's a choice you make with your audience. Now, Mama Nerdy's audience is cool with that. I don't think my audience would be cool with that. Me running 3 minutes of ad. Not to mention, I would have to put more effort in than I wanted to because I don't want to put in the effort to manage ads. I just want to maintain. And ads are necessary for the site. I'm not saying Twitch don't run ads. I'm not saying that. You can run ads all you want on me if they're not intrusive. And that's a problem that we have, is that these ads are designed as intrusive ads.
The problem is the ads that aren't intrusive don't make as much money because if they're just sitting on the side, people just ignore them.
Yeah.
And so they're not worth as much money to companies when they just sit on the side there.
But I'm sure as hell nobody bought a car off of one of my fucking ads.
I mean, that's the thing is like, okay, so advertising is a weird sort of market and it's a weird subject, like marketing and all that, because ads aren't necessarily designed to just make you go out and buy a thing, right? Like you might think that that's what their purpose is, but the actual purpose is to get you familiar with a brand. If you see an ad for a brand frequently and like see a brand around, you're more likely, like subconsciously and psychologically, to consider that brand when you do go and buy something new. Like for example, you're like, oh, well, it's time for me to buy a new car. Well, I saw all these Toyota ads and, they seemed really cool. I'm going to go check out Toyota. Like, that's not so that you immediately go buy a Toyota when you see that ad. It's so that in a year's time or 2 years' time, you've seen all these Toyota ads and you immediately have them on your mind. It's sort of that sort of thing. Or like you'll think back, oh, that commercial was funny. I remember that. Hey, let me think about that sort of thing. It's not designed so that you immediately go buy a thing. It's so that you know about that product and you have it on your mind when you think about buying said product.
And that's advertising.
So
everybody.
it's very advertising is literally designed to be psychological warfare against you to make you buy things. Even it's not an immediate I need to buy this now sort of thing most of the time. It's mostly a
psychological warfare.
Oh, hey, like I need a new razor. Well, I just saw all these razor ads on Twitch while I was watching my gaming content, like few weeks ago, and they looked really interesting. Maybe when I need a new razor, I'll go buy one of those.
Dollar Shave Club, baby.
The only ones that lean into trying to get you to buy now are typically the ones that lean into the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Things
FOMO
that say,
is like the only thing that's sort of like a right now thing.
It's just limited time only, or just trying to say like, oh, well, look at the accolades this is getting. You should buy it now, so you're in with the hip crowd.
Purchase. I wonder if there's a solution to ads though, because a lot of us, I know it's been a thing that's been expressed. We'd take on more ads if they didn't blast through our. If they didn't blast through our
and even more unique possible solution would be some sort of like Twitch official like sponsorships that not the bullshit sponsorships that Stream Elements offers, because those aren't sponsorships.
No,
because like
that's
that's Stream Elements work. Stream Elements doesn't offer sponsorships. They call it sponsorships, but what they actually are is like commissions or whatever. You have to do a thing and then maybe you'll get paid.
Yeah, it's gig work.
Sponsorships in theory should be you get paid to shill the brand, and it doesn't matter how much like progress or whatever you do.
You just shill
that's an actual sponsorship. Even like GamerSupps and like Advanced GG and them are not really sponsorships. They don't pay you just to show the brand. They pay you based on how much you earn and stuff.
Yeah, which of course for Evan, he's making good bank off that.
But like if for example, let's say Twitch offered if Twitch offered a program in their like thing where like you could sign up to shill a brand based on what they like for a certain amount of time on your stream via like various ad pieces and things like that, as well as a brief mention here and there, as the substitute for advertising, then maybe that would be less intrusive because you would have some stuff on the screen for the ad, like for that
Yeah.
that they want to show, and you could like talk about it and like mention it here and there, like or like show for them, sort of like a sponsorship. You get paid for to have their thing, but you don't immediately you don't interrupt your content to show an ad for it and so on.
No. So that's us. That's ads, right? And that could be its own episode. But unfortunately, the problem with talking about ads is you end up circle jerking real hard because nobody fucking listens to us. Twitch is going to keep ramping up ads until the point where it's not
when no one's on the platform.
When no one's on the platform. I'm getting 5 ads, sometimes 8 ads a shot. And that's nuts. I'm not nearly big enough for them to be slapping 8 ads on me. Like, people just fuck off at that point. Like, if I notice a dip in my stream, I assume there's an ad. Yeah, ads don't tend to be longer than 3 minutes. But, like Sir Big Cat said, 8 ads in a row is a fucking pain in the ass. Like, it's a solid pain in the ass. You're just bombarded by them. You could take a BRB break and throw up a window for Twitch to run their ad, and streamer has time to do it. I could, but then there's subs, and I'm maybe I'm an old school vaudevillian. I feel beholden to those I'm intended to entertain.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you could turn off. You can make it so even subs see ads, but like if you do that, you're just what's the point of subbing
spitting
somebody
in the face of
emote?
subs?
Yeah, of course subs are like there to support you. Honestly, like the thing is, like subs are just an easier way to support somebody, and you get like a benefit for it. If you actually wanted to support someone, you just don't you'd give them a tip to their tip jar or something like that, because Twitch isn't taking their money.
Yeah,
your money.
One of the please continue.
But subs is like, I was just gonna say, but subs is sort of like an easy, click button, no ads, get emotes sort of thing. Like you get a little bit of benefit and you support your streamer and sort of like.
That's what YouTube does. That's literally YouTube's sub function. I mean, their follower function is you click a button, you get some emotes. It supports the streamer, but you also have, if you're monetized, you have super chats, which is nice. The thing is that 3/4 of the streamers on Twitch, right? If they moved to YouTube and they had YouTube functionality, they had their, now mind you, of course, where you miss out on a lot of stuff like the interactive sounds and shit, but we're not looking at that. If you moved to YouTube, 3/4 of the people move to YouTube, right? With their audience, they will get banned because they do not understand how YouTube works, and YouTube is very strict.
Yes.
YouTube is very strict. If you're going to stream a game, right, for live, right, for the profits, for the super chats, you have to have those permissions. And in some cases, like when you see with HoloLive, they have to go and talk to the companies. Like, Maury Calliope begged Atlas to let her play Persona. And eventually they let the talents play Persona 5. Right? And I will get to that in a moment, Steel. But some of them, you just have to put a permissions thing in your bio, right? Adhering to monetization based on whatever licensing agreement. Okay? It's all over the fucking place as to what you can do and what you can't do as far as that goes into, because I looked into it. Because I was like, well, maybe I should go to YouTube, or what does it take to stream on YouTube? Because Steph, at one point, wanted us to look into YouTube. And I said, Steph, one, we're not going to get monetized. Like, that's not a thing that's going to happen. And two, pending we did, we have to restructure everything we do. And as Steele put down, the multitude of VTubers rely on their content being chat interactive, like Tits and Redeems, that can help keep a joke or content going. Yes, that is. If your audience is trained for that, then yeah. YouTube is very...
There are YouTube,
impersonal.
like, VTubers. Like the thing, but the thing is, and it's sort of like, there's sort of like two different styles in like streams in general. And like, there's people who like to watch streams just to like talk to people. There's some people who want to watch streams because they're live content, haha, funny. I personally like to talk to the streamer and like, interact with them more. So like, I don't like big streamers a lot, but like, when it comes to YouTube, it's like you got your super chats, and you can maybe get noticed by like a company or something like that, or like not a company, but like a larger streamer that way. Otherwise, you're sort of just a conglomerate, and you don't really get to interact with them as much. Whereas on Twitch, at least you can do redeems and stuff like that, and even more with VTubers, because you can do so much with VTubing, like more than you can with like of course I love freaking Beardy's setup with all the different things in the background that go on, and things like that.
He's a genius.
But like, it's not the norm, I guess. I would say for face cam streamers to have interactivity as much. So for them, YouTube makes more sense than say for VTubers, I think.
Well, once you get larger, a lot of that starts going away, because with a larger audience, you have more people wishing to use those redeems. So then they become very expensive, which is fine, or they just don't use them, which is another thing, right? Or you just don't use them. It's interesting. That's another conversation. The difference between how you relate to your audience as you get larger and what you're capable of doing, without it becoming spammed or incredibly difficult to maintain.
Well, yeah. For example, some of my redeems would become extremely like intrusive at the rate at the levels that they are now. If I left everything as is, if I had 100 more viewers active in my chat, it would be impossible to do anything.
Yeah.
Essentially, because like the price of things in my redeems and such like that, and like the level of cooldowns and stuff on the commands, like people would literally be impossible to do anything, like, because it would just literally be constant cheese and nut spam. There's no limit to how many cheese and nuts you can throw.
Yeah.
Because I had an issue where somebody was like throwing a tantrum and they had thousands of points, so they were just throwing it constantly until they got banned. And then they got banned later. But I set a limit to 30 in each. But even at 30 each, like, that's still, like, if you had 100 people throwing, that's like 300.
That's still plenty for a wine party.
Yeah, that's enough for a wine party. As Steele pointed out, my Hobo RR and my family friendly mode are staples of the community, and so I know what I would do for. I just make the time limit on a Hobo RR longer, or make a certain number that you could grab. But I already know what I would do with family friendly mode. I would expand it out so that so that there would be a 2-hour time limit on it. So you could get me to go for an hour, and then I would have an hour where I could be unfamily friendly, and then another hour. Because part of the humor there is to make Damie not sweary, which is fun. It's fun for everybody. But with a lot of people, then that just becomes like I might be stuck in that for the whole stream. And then the joke is gone because nobody eventually
knows what Damie is like.
Yeah, and eventually you just get really good at family friendly mode. So otherwise,
it's sort of the issue I have with my model redeems. It's like if I have them constant, then nobody actually sees the actual normal model, and everyone just assumes that I'm whatever version of model that I'm.
But it is certainly hard to do live content on YouTube for a few reasons. One, because of a more limited number of things you can do without the endless threat of the DMCA, from which you have
Yeah.
no protection. At least Twitch takes the brunt of that away from you on here. There's a middleman there. You don't just get immediately screwed over for it. It's also easier to fight back. Well,
Yeah.
on YouTube, if you're doing anything that's not just your own performed music or art or just chatting or ASMR or something that's not playing, something that's not using anything else that anything made by anyone that other than you or someone who you specifically worked with, always just royalty free.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do so much more diligence to do things on YouTube without some sort of middleman. Which also means you have to be able to carry things like just chatting completely on your own without as much. Which means some people can.
Yeah, you have to be more attentive to chat.
But also, I think because of the fact that YouTube also has much more strict rules due to the way they do ads, it also means that to do just chatting, you've always be much more of a family-friendly, comfy kind of just chatting specifically. At which point you also have to be quite as active with chat in the first place, and just as long as you're giving a relaxing atmosphere and just active enough, you can probably get away with it. But again, it's a very particular audience you can really work with on YouTube without that middleman to give you some safety net.
You know, you have people like Absolute Unit who are make some of the funniest shorts I've ever seen that come out of their YouTube content. But as Tatsuki always says, they're constantly demonetized. So when they're like, check out our Patreon, they're not like they're shilling it because they're very clear about it. They don't get anything.
The only times I've ever streamed on YouTube were like Pokemon, and I probably wouldn't have had permission from Nintendo to stream Pokemon on YouTube.
No, you would
absolutely
not.
You cannot. I would never dance with a Nintendo in the pale moonlight on YouTube.
No.
So I recognize that. Yeah, it's a good thing I don't stream on YouTube for everyone.
It's one thing if you do it while you're still demonetized. It's fine.
Yeah.
Once you have that going on, however,
I have heard if you get copyright struck a lot on YouTube,
you have
will
3.
probably be denied partner.
You actually have 3 copyright strikes until they close your channel.
Yeah, so it's just.
Well, no, I mean as far as like if you get copyright marked on your videos or shorts, like you can lose partnership. You know, as in like you won't even get the opportunity for it, like even if you hit the numbers, because if you have too much copyright stuff on it.
You can, of course, you can contest it, but contesting stuff on YouTube is always very difficult. There is recourse.
Yeah.
It's just you might as well like just be like, damn.
But just
when it comes to, as what Red Cat said, you come here for the interaction with streamers and people and bring on show, but the games are just as important. It's a medium to talk through. Yeah. So like for me, like games are what fills the content for me. Like, cause I can't do what just chatting by myself with no viewers. Like, I sometimes people just lurk, and they're just fine. Like I don't mind. Like, whether as long as people are enjoying themselves and as long as people are just like like whether they're lurking or chatting or whatever, like as long as people are having fun, then that's quite okay. But I can't do a just chatting stream with people lurking. Like I can't. If I have no one to talk to, I don't know what to talk about. I could talk about myself for only so long before I run out of things to talk about.
Indeed.
So unless I have friends to talk to in chat with me or like in voice chat or whatever, then it's sort of like, well, what do I talk about? Nothing. I don't know. I'm not interesting as a person.
The other thing is that the game's also a very tangible way to express your personality. It's part of why, for instance, I choose the games I do. It's why I lean into the old, the overlooked, and the obscure, because I have deeper pockets when it comes to understanding how to find weird games effectively.
Yeah.
And so being able to showcase those is something that a lot of people cannot do because they don't want to do that digging, because justifiably so. It's work.
It's also like games in general are just like a way to like relate to somebody like, oh, I played that
Mhm.
game. Like, oh, we can
Exactly.
talk about this game sort of thing. Like I'm very bad at like I might say how's your day been or whatever, but a lot of times people are just, oh, it's been good. And they're like, okay,
Mhm.
I could continually berate them and be like, oh, like, oh, what's good about your day? Or like, like, but or I could just be like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
like like games give something people to talk about, something like
Mhm.
and of course that's why reaction content is so like popular, is because like watching something and seeing how the streamer reacts, or it gives you a view into the personality of the streamer, just like with games and things, and it gives people things to talk about as well through,
Mhm.
oh, I'm watching YouTube shorts, or I'm watching clips, or like videos or whatever. Like that's something that people do, and like they like to see how you react, and sort of like and watch it with you sort of thing, rather than just being alone,
Mhm.
I guess. I don't know. Hmm.
Mhm. It's also just with games in particular. There are, for those of you who are not familiar, it's a point I like to echo rather frequently. There have been 45 years of home video game releases. That's a lot
That's a
of
lot.
video games, which
Yeah.
means that the way that you interact with video games will always be distinct, as long as you're willing to find what your games are. It's also a great way to hammer home why playing just one game can be quite off-putting. There are 45 years of home video game console releases. Why do you still only play League of Legends? Love yourself more.
It's funny because I know even more people who play League now. Like one of the VStream like staff members plays it and like talks about how it's like a bad addiction or whatever, but they still play it.
Oh, absolutely. Just once you hit about a year mark in League of Legends, you're no longer playing because you enjoy it. You're playing it because you're caught in the loop. Anyone who's
Yeah,
been in long enough and still says they enjoy it is either lying to you or to themselves.
basically, yeah.
And I'm of course speaking from experience.
Yeah, it's just like when it comes to video games, I play Warframe a lot because I enjoy it and there's sort of always
Mhm.
something to do. But like I also understand that eventually that game's gonna are just gonna die out for me eventually. I don't know when, but eventually I'm gonna not have it. I'm gonna lose interest eventually, I think.
But you've also you've cycled games within that primary slot in your life, as we've discussed prior.
Yeah,
And so it's not just, oh, um, well, the only game I play is Warframe. It's the only game I'm ever going to play. If Warframe ever dies, well, I have no video game. Moving on. It's just.
there was somebody. I think I might have briefly touched on this once, but during the release of the last major update, there was
Mhm.
somebody in my chat who was just extremely angry, and unreasonably so, because the only game they ever played, and the only game that they cared about for the entirety of like the last 10 years, was Warframe, and they played it to an insane degree, and when the update was just yet another disappointment for them because they didn't like the content in it, because they were like like sad about the way that their game was going, they were like distraught because they didn't know what to do, because they didn't want to play the game anymore, but they didn't have any other game to play, and they were like, I put so much time into this, that sort of the sunk cost fallacy. They were just like, what do I like, I can't, like, they couldn't handle the fact that everybody else liked the content that came out, and they couldn't handle that because they didn't like it, and didn't like the way the game was going, but they somehow felt owed because they had played the game for so long and liked the game so much that they, or
Mhm.
like the way the game was so much that they deserved, the game to not go the way it was, even though everyone else enjoys the game the way it is. I don't
Indeed.
even know.
There's a grand degree of entitlement these days for some reason. I'll never quite understand it. Because, particularly
Yeah,
when there are so many video games out there, there is undeniably something for you. You
yeah,
just, if you're not, 'cause even if it's just like, oh, I'm not liking how this game is going, there's probably a game that's similar to it. I mean, for instance, let's say you're not satisfied with Warframe's current direction. Well, there's a game that's looking to have a similar appeal to Warframe from a big publisher, even.
Yeah.
Because Exoprimal is effectively Warframe versus
It's
dinosaurs.
basically Warframe versus dinosaurs, yeah.
I might have to look into Exo Primal.
Which
I haven't heard much about it.
I'm not adverse to.
I mean, I was
Am I about to become an Exo Primal streamer?
You're about to become
Potentially.
an Exoprimal streamer.
because I know when everyone was first being teased, I know everyone was immediately disappointed because it was seeming like it was going to be Dino Crisis.
How dare they?
But the more I've seen of it, the more it's there really aren't many games that fill in that particular arcadey wave shooter.
Ooh,
in a
it is not a free to play game though. It is a paid game.
If you have
Which is
Game Pass, it's free.
I don't have a Game Pass.
You don't have a Game Pass? Okay.
I could have Game Pass, I suppose.
You could have Game Pass. If you so
Or I
desired.
could spend $60 on this game.
Or you could spend $60 on the game itself. Or you could Game
It is
Pass.
a Capcom game.
Yes. Or you could Game Pass, and then if you like it, buy it at a discount.
Or even just
Mm.
you could start with Game Pass that you're keeping up with the early content. Then when it comes on sale, you can drop
this is
Game Pass.
true.
Yes.
You want a new Turok? You guys got a new Turok, and it was terrible.
Also, I think
Nobody
it's
gets
easy.
a new Turok anymore.
I think it's easier to capture what makes Turok more distinct because there are a lot of dinosaur shooters these days.
There are a lot of dinosaur shooters. He is
Ark
Turok.
counts as a dinosaur shooter, kind of. I mean,
What
you
is?
have guns in Ark. I said Ark Survival
Oh.
Evolved kind of counts as a dinosaur shooter.
It
has
does not.
guns.
Does not even kind of count. No.
It has guns.
Who gives a shit?
I mean, so
I don't know.
I do. It's not. Moving on.
Okay.
because I mean there are things like let's see, just on Steam, there are things like Dino D-Day,
Yeah.
which is World War II with dinosaurs.
With dinosaurs.
There is. Let me also remove. Alright. Well, I think
Starfield
that-
is buggy as hell right now.
Starfield? Is that game by is it
Bethesda?
Oh,
Yes.
I mean, look, it's. I think. People are going to have interesting reactions to Starfield.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like part of it shifted some of its direction from a traditional Bethesda RPG to try to appeal to the usual Xbox market.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the combat is going to be interesting enough to actually appeal to them.
Has the combat in any Fallout game outside of the first two been interesting?
I mean, that's precisely the point. Is
Mhm.
that when you're trying to, I think they're trying to make the combat more appealing, but I don't think it's because part of the thing about combat is that they were really harping on how much customizability there is to the gunplay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an important other factor to combat that people are really overlooking, which is enemy variety.
Yes.
And Starfield seems they're not like how big it is. Technically, there is an asterisk here because if you watch the Starfield Direct, which probably shouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
they did explain very briefly how it's going to work. They used two simple words that precisely explained how they're going to make it work.
Okay.
Procedural generation.
Ah.
Oh no.
They're not handcrafting over 1,000 planets.
No.
They're procedurally generating them.
They're letting them generate. Which can be
they-
good or bad, because I've seen really good procedurally generated stuff, and I've seen
They
really
will-
bad procedurally generated stuff.
There'll probably be a couple of very important planets that are completely handcrafted, and everything else will have a few key
Imagine if
points,
Sea of
and then
Thieves
procedurally fill in the rest.
Right.
Look, uh, as Damien can attest when we were watching some of the
Feel free to go
Naughty
off,
3
Alu. I know that you're waiting to, so go for it.
So I have a deep-rooted hatred of the way people use the suffix punk in the modern day, because they do not understand anything about the word. They're just using it because they're simply using it because cyberpunk is the hip and trendy thing, and some things that utilize the clock suffix, so some things that use the punk suffix, do actually abide by the rules. For instance, that Clockwork Revolution game is properly clockpunk.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Yeah.
steampunk is also always done. Is almost always done properly because it's always a thing that's showing the darker side of these.
Yeah. The
Well, proper cyberpunk is actually very punk. It's a big cat because it's always showing the darkest. It's breaking the idealism of a cyber future because cyberpunk properly is always very dystopian and focuses more on a lot of rebellion against these mechanical systems, which is how that. And so, if you were to be NASA punk, you are trying to show that would be more the that meme of "Oh, you're back early." They just I think they're called monsters on the moon. Clocks the gun. It's just what? Monsters on the moon, then just goes back up. Monsters in space with trying to deal with. So actually, by that definition, be more. But even then, that's still not correct. It's hard to really subvert that properly when so many things that did embrace that classic cassette futurism already were terrifying in that way, like Alien.
Yeah, Lunar Core has been around for a while, and if you want to take a look at like cassette tape, the thing that really I love about the Alien aesthetic is it holds up. Even when like you went to Alien Isolation, which is just like a one-for-one being in an Alien movie, the clunky future tech that they used really it ties in well, and because it's universally tied into it's hard baked into the setting, visually it makes sense. It makes sense as far as the visual goes. It makes sense as far as the world goes. You do not stop and go, well, but because you see these things as actual working mechanisms, and that's very important when you deal with something like that you have actual working mechanisms. And I have to say that Alien Isolation refusing to, quote, update the source material is what makes that game truly a beautiful game and lets you experience being in a goddamn Alien game.
So there was a point at which I realized that the terminology had lost its way in this regard. It was an indie game by the name of Morbid the Seven Acolytes.
Morbid or
Morbid?
Morbid?
Which Dad used the accursed term of horror punk.
Oh, I hate that.
It's literally just dark fantasy.
Is a horror punk action RPG with Lovecraftian and Cronenberg touches.
Oh,
which is
Lord, what?
by that definition is FromSoft's entire library horror punk. Didn't think so. Which maybe got a glimpse of this when we were watching some of the definitely naughty theory.
Yeah.
When a game came up called Solarpunk.
Yeah. Which is happy.
It is.
which is a happy game.
It's just words have meaning. In order to convey these ideas, you need to use a terminology that actually reflects it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solar Punk is not. It's like if the sun was exploding. There you go.
It would be one thing if you were using a dystopian world of solar power in maybe the sun's twilight years. That would be a good way to do a proper.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we do a proper solar punk story. But just you can't just have a happy
Shut up,
solar
Steel,
game.
fucker. A good look at a good look is the use of punk in a game is if you go and play Frostpunk. This captures that idea and the use of that word perfectly. Dystopian, you're trying not to freeze to death. Ice is the core of what you're doing, and it's a fight against it. You know, and they handled it so well. You know, there are a few true punks in this world. I guess you've got an offshoot of steampunk is diesel punk, which is its own genre and a well-defined genre, if a little niche. You've got your cyberpunk, you know, but then when you start moving into other punk-based things, you're losing that. The I still was a little thrown by the term kettle punk. That was a little interesting. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say, nuclear punk is often referred to as atom punk.
I'm just like lost in the conversation here about punk stuff. I'm just like listening and just like nodding my head.
So atom punk is it's basically nuclear steampunk. And Fallout encapsulates. It's like when you do atom punk, you're really working with the 1950s, the fear of
No, evil.
the feel of nuclear Armageddon, the you know that fear of radiation and whatnot. It's good. It's good. But would I call Fallout a punk? No, it's just 1950s post-apocalyptic.
It's
Chic, I would say.
So the core thing I think is while there is a dystopian common element in a lot of things that use the punk suffix, the core thing that makes the punk suffix work is that nature of rebellion against the system of which it is a suffix.
I mean,
Which is
please continue.
how
Evil. Sorry.
it's why cyberpunk is always a push back against those cybernetic futures with a focus on the rebellion in one way or another, whether it's protagonist or the antagonist doing so, because there are good examples of both. For instance, Blade Runner is the quintessential cyberpunk work,
True.
and in that case, the rebellion is on the antagonist side.
Mm-hmm.
But most other common works of cyberpunk nature typically have the rebellion on the protagonist side. And even with Blade Runner, it's not a praise of a cyber future. It's still a cynical look, even if the rebellion is an antagonistic force, because it's very sympathetic in the process.
Yes.
And if you assess these sort of natures of punk, you have to have that rebellious aspect. You need to have that pushback against the core of what it is that you're basing it on.
Yeah.
You need that cynical.
You need to see it through the lens of that cynical, ascetic acidic point of view. The if you're not feeling hopeless, you're doing a bad job. You know, if you're not feeling that sense of oppression at some point, then you're doing it a little bit wrong. And that's why games like Shadow what's it?
So System Shock is still inherently cyberpunk because AI is not really it's not a separate thing from cyberpunk. They're
No.
both entwined within the realms of
Very much
cyberspace.
so. Shadowrun. Shadowrun is a great example of a system, both game and role-playing wise, as a tabletop that's rooted in fantasy cyberpunk, which is very hard to do, by the way, but it works because it's building itself on a cyberpunk core, and then after building itself on that core, populating it with these fantasy creatures, but building them in such a way that they fit in this cyberpunk aesthetic. They just basically took the cyberpunk map, they spread it out, and then they drew on it, and it's beautifully done. You know, it's if you're into cyberpunk and you're a tabletop gaming person, I strongly suggest looking into Shadowrun. It's classical. It's classical.
A lot of good things about Shadowrun.
Yeah, Shadowrun is classical. And the Shadowrun games that were released, that were recent, like I say recently, but the Shadowrun isometric games were really good as well, and really encapsulated Shadowrun and what it feels very well. So you have a lot of freedoms within cyberpunk as well. You could really work through it, but you know, when you're working into, and steampunk is a outreach of cyberpunk that has really a few different ways. Some of it is like a gritty steam sweaty society, and then others it's just everything's based on the concept of the clockwork and the steam and the ether.
I think,
but that now that the word core has been established, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steam core is a better term for it. But
not
at the time,
necessarily.
we only had punk. Please continue.
So it does typically depend on the tone, because many works of a steampunk nature do still have that natural punk aspect, even if it's a bit less clear. Partially because when you have the steampunk settings, they're typically very based on Victorian England.
They are.
But they typically still focus on breaking away from and rebelling against the norms of that, typically by having a greater freedom through how accessible these forms of energy are to the common man. That's where the punk aspect comes in with steampunk.
Invention is truly a core of steampunk, and you're right. And with that invention comes a breakaway and a freedom.
Yes, that's how steampunk still works. Though if you do go for more the completely optimistic side without that core of rebelling against society, you typically go more into the gas lamp fantasy.
Ah, thank you. I couldn't remember what the proper name of it was. I appreciate it. Thank you, Alu. I'm like, there's an actual name for that, and I can't fucking remember what it was. Thank you, Gaslamp Fantasy.
Yes.
Thank you, Alu. I appreciate it.
And then
that was
with
going to bug me forever, because even as I'm saying like Steam Core, I'm like, that's not right. There's a word for this.
Yes, and similarly, when it comes to Clockpunk, it always still uses more of the fact that precision is not always ideal. Even with recent examples, because Clockpunk is sort of Clockpunk's the new cyberpunk. Let's be fair here. It's what everyone's starting to lean into with both Clockwork Revolution as well as Steel Rising, which was a marvelous game. Both of which lean very much into that state of rebellion. Some more literally than others, because Steel Rising is literally.
It's literally about a rebellion.
It's literally the French Revolution, but with Clockpunk robots.
But with robots.
That's quite literally Clockpunk. Quite literally all around.
Yeah.
But with by establishing what makes these punk philosophies work, allow me to pose the question to you all instead. How would horror punk work?
It's not. It's just horror. It's just horror.
How do you rebel against the norms of horror?
By making... Okay, you know what's horror punk? I've got it. A horror
Alright.
punk movie would be The Sound of Music. Okay, there's rebellion against the Nazis, but it's an uplifting movie. Horror punk. Rebelling
But-
against the horror concept. Nailed it. Nailed it. Sound of Music.
Sure.
Horror punk. Got it.
Erotic doesn't help because many horror films are already rooted in eroticism. Let's be fair here.
Especially if it's
let-
vampires.
Let's not pretend that eroticism is not central to so many forms of horror,
Yeah.
from slashers to vampires to the avant-garde to just almost any subgenre of horror has a large root in sexploitation.
I mean, any Anne Rice novel that you read or Interview with the Vampire, that's just one fuck book, man. They just ooze booty touching.
Ah,
In fact, Vampire the Masquerade makes a really interesting point. When they talk about their vampires, and they say that their vampires are very sensual creatures, but they're not very sexual creatures. Because a vampire, to create any secretion whatsoever, it has to be based on blood, which is gross. But anyway, they use their sensuality as a weapon, as promises, but are not beholden to sort of the gross parts. Vampires themselves are very, very sensual creatures. Unless you're playing a system I made, and then they're just gross. But the common vampire... Like, Dracula fucks. Like, we know this. Straight up. Dracula.
true.
Dracula's
they don't-
getting some Mina booty.
Well, also he did have the look. You don't have 3 wives,
This is true.
or brides rather than wives, but
Yeah,
nonetheless.
3 brides.
And well, also Sibicat is true. Typically, anything in that realm is simply with another vampire.
Yeah, and the act of drinking blood is from a pure white nape is right. Exactly. There's you've got everything you need. There's penetration. There's a surrender.
Oh
There's
God.
there's all dude. Trust me, vampires are fuck machines. Well, the modern interpretation of vampires are fuck machines. Now, your old school vampires, like your old school vampires, that
Well, so
those are not. Those are not.
they're sort of a reverse bell curve.
They're sort of yeah.
So, because classical vampires, in terms of their oldest literary examples, were very rooted in sexuality. Because even if we go further back than Dracula to the first,
And disease.
Truly- if we go back to the first truly iconic vampire in literature, Carmilla.
Carmilla. Now,
Carmilla was literally a presentation. It was literally meant to be a damning representation of lesbianism by making even more of the world, making it a vampire.
yes. And if you go back far enough in legend, you talk about vampires being buried in their shrouds or having foulness and spreading disease. So when you deal with like old Slavic legends, when you deal with like old legends of vampires, you're getting a creature that encapsulates ideas like what happens after you die, the fear of sin and disease, as vampires are often noted back then as disease carriers. There are some that don't even drink blood, they just make you sick, or they consume, right? The fear of the other coupled with the fear of disease and not knowing what happens when you die coupled with, of course, people not understanding the act of decomposition. So when you dig someone up and they look bloated, you're like, oh shit, they've been eating. Or when the skin recedes and it looks like someone's nails have grown, they're like, that's clearly alive. Or when you stake it and it moans because of the gases inside, like you're dealing with fear, just true fear of so many different things. But then when you go into literary vampires, as Alutier said, you get this, it whips almost as a reversal of what these folktale vampires are. They stop being dirty and mindless and become sensual and thoughtful and vicious and cunning. Like predators. They become predators. You're supposed to jump in here.
And then after the classic Disney vampires, we get more into the vampires as just a monster. We
Yes.
reduce the...
Did we somehow roll our way back to Castlevania?
We've not touched Castlevania yet!
We've not touched Castlevania yet! We're doing our best!
So, because after Dracula, because Dracula inspired many works that ignored the sexuality of the character, and
We've gone
thus
like 14 episodes without talking about Castlevania. We're not going to break this streak.
so,
I don't know that we could say that we've officially gone 14 episodes without Castlevania, because I'm pretty sure it's come up lots.
but we had 13 without talking about it properly.
Yeah, we had 13 without talking about it properly. Okay, Ali, take it.
Okay.
Because the first one was literally about Castlevania.
Just Castlevania.
But then things that were inspired by Dracula that didn't really hurt. So there were two branches from that, and the more prevalent one was the vampires as monsters, reducing the sexuality, the sensuality, and was just the blood hunting monster. It really wasn't effectively just a more cunning werewolf.
Yeah, basically.
But whereas then there was this other branch that was going on that wasn't quite as influential until more recently, which was your works of things like Anne Rice, and of course, the Lost Boys.
And of course, which is homoerotic to such a degree. When you go back and you watch it again, you're like, whoa. Okay. All right.
And so,
I'm here for
and so
it.
there was always been a branch that retained the sexuality of vampires, but it was for the most part limited more to the literary side of things,
Yeah.
except for the Lost Boys, which I think was a film original. Could be wrong on that one though.
Let me take a look.
All right. Meanwhile, but then, of course, we cannot talk about the history of vampires and their sexuality without, of course, talking about the elephant in the room. Twilight.
Feldman and Haim were in that fucking movie.
Mhm.
Along with Kiefer Sutherland, Jamie Getz, Diane West, Brooke McCarter. I forgot that The Lost Boys is packed with star power. Like, this was a fucking power movie. Right here, right now. But no, it was based on... It's just a screenplay. It's not based on anything else.
Thought so. My memory is in fact served me well. So, but yes, for the most part, when it comes to the history of vampires, there's been a reverse bell curve. Classically, and in the modern day, vampires are predominantly very sexually focused creatures, whereas there was a middle ground where focusing more on the vampire as a monster, and not even one that is interesting in that regard, because the thing that makes a vampire truly terrifying as a monster in general is its ability to lie to you. The fact that it can make you believe it very easily, all while using you as a medium to satiate its hunger. Not with hypnotism, but also just because vampires are always portrayed as, well, sociopathic.
Vampires are very... A proper vampire is very centered on their own needs. In fact, one could even say that the Cullens out of Twilight are classical vampires in being fucking sociopaths. Like, Edward smell good girl, want girl. There you go. They meet, 400 pages later they do it. Like, ooh, bacon avocado hot dog. That sounds good. You know,
Fuck.
they meet, they fuck. But even the Cullens, as not meant to be like stereotypical quote vampires, still possess that sociopathy. They're, despite the fact that the two leaders of this little vampire family they have care about their little vampire children, Edward is like written sociopathically. And Bella's a horrible heroine. But we could talk about the fucking failings of that book later on.
That's a conversation for you to have. I'm not indulging in that.
You're not indulging in that?
Oh my lord.
I'm not going to give that conversation a time of day. If you want to talk about Twilight, you can do that on your own time when I'm not here.
Damn. You don't want to tear apart a shitty book with me and how it spits in the face of vampirism?
Here's the problem. In order for me to properly rip into Twilight, I have to actually take the time to either watch or read Twilight, and I will not do that to myself.
I was subjected to it. The only thing you fault Twilight for is making 50 Shades of Grey? Yes, because 50 Shades of Grey was originally Master of the Universe, or it's like Master of the World, which was Bella and Edward in their own thing, and then it was posted on fanfiction.net later, retooled and turned into a terrible fucking series. Yeah.
Look, at least
I never cared for My Chemical Romance.
I would at least find it more amusing to humor 50 Shades of Grey, because it hurts me less physically.
Okay.
Oh my
I've
god.
not been subjected to 50 Shades of Grey, thankfully.
I have not either.
So, we, alright.
Keep it that
In
way.
retrospect, the Big Bang caused everything. Literally, like what?
I mean,
We
yes,
are not
however-
getting into Maxwell's Demon.
But
I'm tabling this right now because that all leads to Maxwell's Demon, and I will not have that bullshit.
I mean, if we're literally going into things that caused things, but yeah.
No, next topic. No Maxwell's Demon. That is the Castlevania of thought experiments.
Mm.
Oh my god. We need a new topic before I explain Maxwell's Demon, and then we're here forever.
We're never leaving, Damien.
We're
This is
never.
your life now.
This is my life now. Because after you talk about Maxwell's Demon, then you have to talk about free will versus determination, and oh my god, I
Cause and
can't.
effect.
I can't. I fucking can't. We started way too early for me to do that. You want to talk about Maxwell's Demon? We could do that on a different episode.
Mark it down.
we might need a
Topic for
different
future.
podcast for this.
For Maxwell's Demon? Yeah.
Well, just for being angry at thought experiments.
We
The thought experiment podcast where we talked about things like the Ship of Theseus and stuff.
The Ship of Theseus. I like the Ship of Theseus.
Look, the Ship of Theseus, I think that's something we could talk about safely on here, because there's no anger there. But I think
No,
there's-
it's really clever. They're both the Ship of Theseus. That's what ends up happening.
Well, that's debatable, but yes.
They both become, because one is the physical ship of Theseus and the other one is the spiritual ship of Theseus. You have two ships of Theseus. Now, the question is, which one would you consider real based on what are the qualities there? Would you consider the spiritual ship of Theseus to be the real ship of Theseus, or would you consider the physical ship of Theseus to be the real ship of Theseus? I believe, and I am correct, and that the spiritual ship of Theseus is the correct one, because that's what you imbue the concept
I
of.
mean, you could hypothetically ship a Theseus a human being, which is where
That's
it
called
gets
Frankenstein.
complicated.
That's
Well, no.
Frankenstein.
Well, no, but like, well,
That's
like getting into
literally
like more
Frankenstein.
technical technology stuff. Like, you can ship a Theseus a human being through like the means of like technology.
I am
Like,
so
like sort of like.
dubious about what you just said.
Well, it's
You
like,
see this
like,
one little eye squinting? One little eye squinting at you.
I'm saying like if you ship a Theseus to human being by replacing all of your cells with nanomachines, but
Yeah.
then kept the cells for and rebuilt the person back out of the cells that they came from, you would then have a version of a person that is exactly identical.
No, they've covered this. You're both you. In fact,
Okay.
there's a book, and I cannot remember this, where they cover this, and they run into a problem. It's a little bit different, in which you sign up and you have your memories flashed, right? And then when you die, okay, your clone, your basically your body is cloned, and those memories that were flashed are put into the body, right? You're you again. And they run into a problem where someone was declared dead and they're not actually dead, and they make the person, and now they can't figure out who in theory is the person. They end up coming up with the person who was originally there is the person, and the person who is created secondarily does not. It's interesting. They don't have any rights, so they kill him. It's really fucked up.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you imagine being like you and you're like, and then you're just like, well, I guess I'm dead now because like there's another version of me, and I just die now. I guess.
In fact, Soma brings up the idea of the ship of Theseus as a person. Soma brings this up several times when they need to move you from one space to another. So they have you sit in a chair, and they replicate your consciousness into the other body. And it's so interesting, since you're working on your current stream of consciousness, you understand yourself to continue to be going. And the guy in Soma's like, why am I talking in the other room? What's going on? And it gets explained to him like, this is how this works, right? And he has the option of killing the other person. Matham, you are both beautiful and wonderful, and your mustache fills me with homoerotic tension. So, in fact, at the end of the fucking game, they deal with this again. Soma is very interesting if you want to deal with the idea of consciousness, what makes a human, what is real. Go play Soma. All right, that's you want to ship a Theseus a person? Zova, go play Soma and then come back, and then we'll talk about Soma. That's literally that.
I don't know.
But-
I would just like think about it as from the perspective of your own consciousness, like your stream
But
of
what if we
consciousness.
did the ship of Theseus with shipping?
Shipping?
Like what? Like you and Zova's power ship is Aluvastria?
So if there's a power couple and
Yes.
we have a clone of one replace, and we
Are you going to
The
be
joke
able to
doesn't
get
really-
through this?
no, it won't. It's-
Okay,
It,
okay.
it was a very simple joke that really did not need to be explained.
No. I see. Okay, I'm aware that this occurred. Okay, all right.
From there, you can fill out the blanks in your
Fill
own
out the
head.
blanks yourself.
If you understand the ship of Theseus, you understand how shipping works. You can do the rest of the work.
No.
It is your homework, and I expect it to be on my desk by Monday morning.
My favorite is not Paul McCartney's dead, but that Kylie Jenner's been replaced as a Kardashian, that she died, and the Kylie Jenner we have is not the Kylie Jenner we know, which is really can feed into that simply because the Kardashians have had so much work done. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They've
yeah,
had
yeah.
so much work done that. Yeah. That it truly doesn't.
Yeah.
It truly doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's also how you ship a Theseus a person.
That's also how you ship it. This is true.
Oh my lord.
That is also how you ship a Theseus
guess,
a
yeah.
person.
You replace all the
Welcome,
parts. Your
welcome
parts
assuming the
until-
Void episode 15, the ship of Theseus.
Yeah.
You replace all your
Welcome
parts
to
so you have just a
Streaming
brain,
into
and
the
then you
Void.
replace the brain. Then what?
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. Simply because Zova's trying to be difficult now.
Listen, when am I not trying to be difficult? To be fair.
This is true. Okay, Zova, game
I'm
that you're
Chaos
excited
Incarnate.
about.
Game that I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's coming out.
Um, games that I'm excited about. What? Games.
Because the summer games and stuff have
Excited about?
happened, and there's a lot of interesting things that are going on. Still no Bloodborne 2.
There's never going to be a
I-
Bloodborne.
Don't you do this to me,
No,
Alu.
if there's any games.
Don't
I
you do this
know
to
if
me,
there's
Alu.
any games that I'm interested in that are coming out. Like, there's only one thing I can think of that I know about that I'm somewhat interested in.
Okay.
And that's the DLC for Cyberpunk, but I don't really know what else is coming out. I'm kind of like under a rock.
Fair enough.
Like I don't know. Like I've heard Payday 3 and I've heard of Starfield, but I'm not like bribed about either of them. I don't know anything about Armored Core. Like I don't know. I sit under a rock and play V Street, or I sit under a rock and play freaking Warframe all week. Like I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I tend to keep my finger a bit more on the pulse, at least this time of year, and then the rest of the year I stop paying attention. But this is the time of year where I pay attention to what is actually announced, partially because there's a beauty to E3, whether or not E3 is a part of it or not.
The Armored Core game I'm looking forward to, but that's just because I like Armored Core. I've been a big Armored Core fan, even when they weren't very good games anymore. New Assassin's Creed I don't care about. It's just fucking Assassin's Creed, and no Assassin's Creed will ever be as good as Black Flag.
So I will provide two answers to this question.
Mm-hmm.
One is there's one game I'm most intrigued by, and one I'm most looking forward to based on what I actually know about the gameplay. Because one of them we have no idea of gameplay.
I
but
don't
I'm
think
intrigued
Jedi. I
nonetheless.
don't think it's labeled as Jedi Outlaws. I think it's just Star
It's-
Wars
it-
Outlaws.
It is just Star Wars.
Uh.
Outlaws. So, out of the Xbox showcase, they revealed the next game from Compulsion, South of Midnight. That has my attention. We have no idea how it plays, but just things that deal with American folk are already very few and far between, to the
We
point where you
don't-
have my attention for that alone.
We don't have enough. We don't have enough Southern Gothic.
True.
Which I feel, which really, the TV show American Gothic, as it was, is the only true. And by the way, if you like interesting horror and just like slow burn stuff, American Gothic is really good. It's really good. It's really fun. It's clever. I would go with it, but also it's because you don't get a lot of that Southern Gothic or even classic Americana Gothic stuff. You don't. Amnesia the Bunker, yeah, it's free on Game Pass. Apparently the Bunker's good. That's what I've heard, but I don't know. I don't trust it.
Though I will say, Tim, we are getting more things that delve into the realms of Americana recently, whether it's just pop Americana, something Gothic, or just
Yeah.
Even things that are just a bit more outside of that realm.
Yeah. And I'm excited for more Americana based stuff, which is why don't you explain to the audience, Alu, what Americana is, because that can be a very confusing idea.
Ah, I see you're distinctly leaning into my strengths here. Very well.
Yeah, yes I am.
So, Americana is effectively a these days more of an art style that represents the period of American history from effectively the post Wild West period up until effectively the 1960s, the era of the post gold rush and the economic growth and just the general realm of America just kind of being very isolated and appreciative of itself, that optimism that still was rooted in the connection of a small town, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
That is the core of Americana, and that
The age of the Burma shave sign.
it's the sort of thing that people long for when they make notes of things like white picket fences, and effectively the closest you get to it in many cases in the modern days is certain cases of suburbia.
Yeah. When you have people do callbacks to, what America was, they're talking about Americana, is what they're really talking about. That before globalization, when we were, quote, Americans.
I wouldn't quite say before globalization, but more a case of before the death of the American dream with Vietnam, because Vietnam.
I was just like, whenever someone is like, oh, I wish things were the way they used to be. So you like it when like we had like a lot of women didn't have rights and like racism was bigger and all this and that. Like that's basically what they're saying.
I mean, yes, but
Americana itself isn't. It has more of a purity to it. It's grounded in a concept.
Americana
is a methodology.
Americana is taking that particular thing is typically more focused on the hopefulness, because it's typically more on this idea of America as a melting pot.
Yeah.
So sort of ignoring the prevalence of
systemic
a lot of backwards thinking.
Yeah.
Racism, and like no women's rights, like no LGBT rights, like
ignoring that typically shifts the view of Americana into Southern Gothic.
Yeah, that's when you're when you're dealing with Southern Gothic, where you're dealing with
religious prevalence.
Southern Gothic. Yeah, everything you talked about is taking the Americana and tipping the scale into Southern Gothic, where we deal with the oppressive systems, the mystery of the small town, the bayou that you don't go near, the rules that you don't break, the unspoken stuff like Sundowner counties. These are all Southern Gothic.
When the true monster is your neighbor.
Yeah, that's Southern Gothic. Whereas Americana is more of the hopeful, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Giving your opponent an apple pie, just giving your neighbor an apple pie just because they're your neighbor. It's what you do.
Your neighbor, that's what you do.
Something Gothic is, well, my neighbor looks different than me. I don't want to give him an apple pie.
Yeah, exactly.
Or anything.
Americana also encapsulates that, we're all Americans, and the American dream can be achieved by anybody, and even to the point of rationing and healthy patriotism was another
one. The whole
one.
Anybody thing, again, is like sort of like, very specifically.
Indeed.
Like
moving back into Southern Gothic, Sova.
I mean,
anyways.
Americana is Americana. Southern Gothic is Southern Gothic.
No, but like it was sort of like it's sort of like this idea like that was sort of false, because like we had there was this idea that was there, but it was really only applied to certain people. It didn't really everybody.
Well, Americana is not rooted in reality.
You can long for that in a more progressive way, which is appreciable. However, it is important to acknowledge when people actually are properly pining for these things without specifying caveats.
Yeah,
that these eras were not great.
No, but as a art piece, as a game, as a concept, they exist and are fun to explore and fun to work around. And while I love Americana, and I do love the idea, we don't have enough really good Americana games. There's Americana in Fallout, actually. Fallout has a lot of Americana sprinkled through it. But the idea of when you move into like the idea of community and the blasted remains of said communities, and the signs and the abandoned cars, and all of this is Nuka-Cola itself is fantasy Americana. But
So
no, not
why would
everything is either Americana or Southern Gothic. GTA is just GTA.
So the important thing to keep in mind, Steel, is that in order to be Americana, you have to be set prior to at least 1980.
Yeah.
70s are a muddy ground, but if you're once you're at 1980, you enter into more of the because there was Hollywood.
No, Fallout has Americana in it.
Well,
It is not an
well,
Americana game. It harkens back to the 60s.
Yeah, because most of Fallout's aesthetic, because I think the idea of Fallout was that effectively America sort of stopped in 1960, which does mean that those American elements do still
the
work, just not
Americana
near that
elements
old-timey
too.
element.
So,
But just GTA is just explicitly very modern, and there's
Yeah.
no callback to because even with the equivalent of Red Dead Redemption is pre-American, because that's Wild West.
that's the Wild West. That's pre-Americana.
Because if you want to talk about things that are proper
Side note
Americana,
about Wild West stuff is that I've always found it fascinating that sort of essentially the whole idea of the Wild West and whatnot was like the media that we've consumed about Wild West stuff is basically essentially like samurai movies but Wild West.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, there's a reason for that.
Sure,
Also, the idea that samurais and cowboys existed at the exact same
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
in history
They did. Yeah, they did.
blows my mind. It's like when you really think about like what things happened at the same time, you didn't really think about that.
There was a period where Tesla, Twain, and Einstein were all alive at the same time.
Yeah,
That fucks me up.
crazy.
But
Three of the greatest minds.
when
They
it
never really
comes
interacted with each other.
when it comes to
Tesla
example,
and Twain actually were friends.
Oh, well then there you go. But yeah.
Mhm.
Tesla was a bit of a nut job sometimes, but not in a bad way, just because he was eccentric. And stuff,
Tesla
but yeah.
also made Twain shit himself with an earthquake generator.
but one of the
Oh, the joys of oscillation.
most prevalent examples of both Americana and Southern Gothic within the same body of work would be the works of one H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the whole can of worms.
It
It's
is
not
absolutely.
really a can of worms. You can easily avoid it by going, yes, we know he was a racist, but he wrote good
has tainted
stuff.
some of his. It has tainted some of his works, but some of his works are fine.
Yeah. Well,
It-
and please continue before I go off.
It is still important to acknowledge these how important his work is for archiving that era, because of how when it comes to a lot of written works from that era, very few actually remain in the public consciousness in the modern time because of how irrelevant they are to modern genres, because they're not. Literature of that era was heavily usurped
Mm-hmm.
by Hollywood.
Yes.
Which leaves Lovecraft with all of his personal failings
Which are a
As-
laundry list.
as one of the best examples of archiving what Americana and Southern Gothic looked like from that era.
Mm-hmm. And the Southern Gothic is encapsulated in Lovecraft's work as fear. Primarily the fear of the other. And whether you're doing fear of your neighbor or fear of the mystery in your town or the fear of the creature in the bayou, in and amongst, you know, the oppressive rigidity of society, Lovecraft's work was all based on fear, except for Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadath. But a lot of it was based on fear. Fear of ultraviolet light. Fear of... he was afraid of air conditioning, which is why he wrote Cool Air. The man had a his constitution was legitimately too weak for math. This man is Man Bear Pig just wants to get you. This fear is what fueled his great literary talents. This fear is what gave him the ability to write such truly cosmic things, and his idea as really looking at things very bleakly, like, yes, there are things above us. No, they don't care. We are alone in an unfeeling universe surrounded by horrors. Truly exhibits how Lovecraft felt about the world and about immigrants and the islanders. But that fear is what made him a good writer. But that fear is also what encapsulated the concept of Southern Gothic, which is interesting because he was from the North. The Nort, so they say. But Southern Gothic can be a touchy subject because of the other things that you may have to include if you're writing it or if you're gaming in it. But it is, when done correctly, an incredibly rewarding literature to consume because of the oppression and the fear and the terror that goes into it. Whereas Americana makes you feel more hopeful and bright, and it's like the sun and the moon almost. Americana's the bright one. Southern Gothic is the not so great one. There, I'm done. I went off. Next person.
Hi.
Someone contribute.
Contribute? I did. What do you mean?
You did.
You mentioned Americana and all this and that. You mentioned
And then
like,
you turned it all into Southern Gothic. You're a bummer zone.
Well, no, it's just whenever like someone talks about, oh, well, it was better in the olden days. Like nobody really thinks about, oh, well, it was better for the people who. It's sort of like history is written by the victors, right? The people who had the best time sort of wrote the history, and so like nobody really thinks about the minorities and things that sort of was left in the background, or like like oppression and things like that. So like whenever someone says, "Oh, it was better in the olden days" or whatever, like, "Oh, things were better back then," they don't really like they might have they might not realize for a lot of people it wasn't.
No, for some people it was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, so
it's a bit of a bummer, dude.
That was my contribution. But right. Yeah, no, where's the conversation going now? Like
I have about Lovecraft. No idea where it's going now. We have 5 minutes left before we hit the 2-hour mark. And we've gone all over the place again into streaming.
I mean, that's what we do.
That's what we do, though. But I think
that's why you all come here. I think is the fact that you have no idea where we're going to go at any given moment.
No, and I think one of the fun things about Zova talking about the dark side of Americana, which goes into Southern Gothic, is the idea of flipside literature. And I really like the idea of flipside concepts. Like if you turn it one way, you get one type of literature or media to consume, but you change like two things and it flips over to its counterpoint. As I think we can all agree, Americana and Southern Gothic are just, they're on the same spectrum. It's just which way you flipped it, which I always find very, very interesting. I like dichotomy sort of concepts like that, which are a lot of fun. But if you haven't seen or played any real fun Americana games, it's not really something you see in games. Ali, can you even think of a game that like is really steeped in Americana?
Loretta.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Go play Loretta.
Look, I can throw you a handful of names you want just Americana properly.
Yeah, please do.
All right, so we also, as I mentioned, H.P. Lovecraft. There is the Call of Cthulhu: Shadow of the Comet, which is a rather old game, one of the first games to utilize the style of Americana in a video game fashion. 7 is really more distinctly Southern Gothic.
But 7 Southern Gothic is fuck. I would even go as far as say Bayou Horror.
It toes the line between Southern Gothic and hillbilly horror.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have that Americana that there's no optimism of the small town living there because part of the core thing of Americana is community, and there is no community in 7. It's just a family.
A family goes right into hillbilly horror, just like solidly right in there.
But other examples, of course, include a more ambiguous one that does toe the line of the chronological setting is a game called Mizerna Falls, which is a sort of a horror. It's a classic style survival horror game that does focus on. It does actually have a community in a small town. It really captures a lot of the core elements of Americana in a slightly more modern setting than usual. Once you're bustling cities, you're not Americana. That's just the fact.
Yeah.
And Silent Hill cannot work as Americana because there's no people.
But does it work as Southern Gothic?
No.
Okay.
Because the core thing of Southern Gothic is that you have to be rooted in the sense of Americana, and there really is no. There's very little in Silent Hill, to my understanding, that really shows that focus on community in the first place, let alone to subvert it. It's really more just there's a cult doing cult things. It happens to be in a small town.
Yeah, there's a cult. They're doing cult-ass things. Yeah.
I
want to do cult-ass things.
And then, of course, there are plenty of examples within a more modern, and some of which actually do some very interesting things, like Norco, which is both Americana in the Southern Gothic lens, while also being cyberpunk.
That is a
which
lot.
is a weird. That's a weird combination.
That's a lot of things that you said that I don't know work, but okay.
It's interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. All right. So that brings us to our 2-hour mark. Where we usually end this. So
canonically microwaved it, baby. I saw that. I was lost in the confusion of where that happened, like what the context is.
Well, I still have to play the part. I still have to play The Witcher 3 up until the part where you chuck a baby in a fire, but we'll see how that goes. All right, so who do we want to raid? On my list,
Mama Nerdy's still alive?
Mama Nerdy's still alive, reaching the end of the game. We can send him over though. I've got
Jam did just start.
Jam did just start. Okay, so we're gonna send him over to
Jam.
Jam.
Started, then fuck yeah, let's go.
I'm questioning whether I should keep streaming or not.
That's up to you.
Like turn off,
it's up to you.
Like turn off the camera and turn it on again and play more Fallout. Probably, I'll if I do, I'll do it later on. So here we go. We're raiding Jam. Steel has decided that Void Raid will be your call out. So please feel free to Void Raid. Zova is a bottom is also acceptable.
Given, but yes.
Given. All right, but with that, I've been Damie, your dynamically augmented media independence.
Evil! I've been Zavatri, the evil Eldritch princess of the Astral Realm.
I've been Alutia, who is apparently mask punk because that's what we do here now.
And this, of course, has
I'm
been the
Zova
lovely
Punk.
Shannon. And you have been streaming into the void. Go give Jam lots of love.